Welcome to InterPartyConflict, the podcast where we answer your questions so you can have the best tabletop gaming experience possible. My name is Gabe.
And I'm Jeff.
And we're going to answer your questions today. But first, I have an announcement to make.
Oh, yeah?
We are sponsored by Audible.
Oh.
A lot of you out there, if you enjoy listening to our podcast, you probably listen to other podcasts too. Hopefully, there's a lot out there.
Yeah.
If you enjoy listening to podcasts, it also stands to reason that you enjoy listening to audiobooks.
Oh, sure.
There's lots of audiobooks out there. A lot of them are very, very good.
Uh-huh.
They are a great way to spend time, a great way to read books while you're, out and about, while you're on your way to work, while you're at work, maybe, depending on your job.
Yeah.
So we have partnered up with Audible. And if you go to audibletrial.com/conflict, you can get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial. So there's over 180,000 titles for you to choose from for your iPhone, your Android, your Kindle. There's lots of ways you can listen to them. Any kind of, internet accessible device, you can listen to your audiobooks. Mm-hmm. And once you get that free audiobook, that's yours for forever. Right. Whether you continue with the trial or whether you renew your account or not. Yeah. You always have that.
Right. Yeah. You own that audiobook at that point and you can listen to it at any time.
Yes. I definitely recommend everybody go to audibletrial.com/conflict. Mm-hmm. Like I said, free audiobook download, which is great. And if you stick with the trial, from what I understand, every month you get one free audiobook, and then you can get additional ones if you want to pay extra as well.
Right. Yeah. You can purchase books from the huge list that they have there, and then you get your free one every month.
Yeah. So once again, just check out audibletrial.com/conflict.
Yes.
Now, Jeff, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
Pretty good. Yeah.
Cool.
I've actually been listening to an audiobook.
Oh, yeah? What's that?
Mort by Terry Pratchett. It's part of the Discworld series.
Okay. I feel like I've heard of that. I've heard of Discworld. I'm just not sure if I've heard of Mort.
I read a bit of the first book, and I did like it, but I rarely find motivation to actually read, so I figured an audiobook is a good way to go. And so I started listening to actually, I think it was on another podcast that it was recommended to me to start with Mort. Okay. Which is, I think, the fourth book. I can't quite remember. I think it's the fourth book in the Terry Pratchett Discworld series, and it's really fun. There's so many good little one-liner gems in there. Terry Pratchett's really good at just some of the stuff he comes up with is ridiculous.
Yeah.
There's a great line by the character Death. That's I don't know about you, but I could murder a curry. And he's talking about food, curry, and
sure.
So Skylar and I are big fans of curry, and she's a big fan of Terry Pratchett. So when I got to that part in the book, she got excited. So.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I don't listen to a ton of. I listen to audiobooks sometimes. I probably listen to them as often as a lot of people, to be honest.
Sure.
But because I just have so much time where I'm listening to whatever. I just mostly listen to podcasts.
Right. Yeah.
But from Audible, I've listened to the first book of Game of Thrones. I haven't gone beyond that. It's good and all, but I wasn't super invested in it.
Sure.
And I haven't seen the show.
Right. Yeah.
I've also listened to in fact, the reason that I got an Audible subscription myself a while ago was because there was a book that Steve, our mutual friend Steve, recommended to me called The Beam, which was, I don't really remember what the story was behind the writing of the book, and I'm not going to embarrass myself by trying to remember it. But basically, it's kind of it's a futuristic story about, think of it like, the way that Steve put it to me was that imagine if we had the technology to do all sorts of genetic augmentation on ourselves so we could live for hundreds of years and do all sorts of crazy things, but humanity and the way that people interact with each other hadn't evolved. So people still squabbled about petty things. They still acted like people do nowadays, but also with all of these genetic modifications and stuff. And it was an interesting concept to me.
Yeah. What's there? I think there's some term for it. It's like the singularity or something like that.
Yeah.
Where it's I might be thinking of a completely wrong thing, but it's the idea of it's the technological advancement, but the actual like technology has evolved, but people haven't.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
like, and there's a lot of people are discussing this a lot actually, because there's this exponential growth in technology and stuff like that, but like people aren't able to learn how to use it correctly before the next new thing comes out. And so we have all this like social networking stuff that like is like it might be screwing us up, it might be helping us out, maybe a little bit of both. I don't know, like, you know, but yeah, it's the idea that like technology is advancing faster than we can handle it.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
And one thing about Audible, I guess I thought we had finished our Audible spiel, but just one more thing about them is that if you're using a device that isn't connected to the internet, like I don't have a smartphone,
sure, and
so my MP3 player is just like a cheapo one. You upload MP3s to it, and then you just listen to it on your own time. Mm-hmm. It is difficult to get an Audible file on one of those.
Yeah.
They're made to be listened to via the internet.
Yeah.
If you listen to them on your computer or your smartphone, you'll be fine. However, if you listen to them on an MP3 player, it's going to be difficult to get it set up.
I think, I think what it is like you need to have a way to download it, and then it has to. I don't think it can be transferred from device to device. So like the file itself, I don't think it would be. It's not like a full file. It's kind of like a streaming thing. Or
I had to I downloaded like a third-party program, and then I had to log in through Audible so that the third-party program could access the file and then convert it into an MP3.
Sure.
It was a very cumbersome thing, but
And I'm not sure if it's strictly by their terms of service, but
no. Well, did I say, hey, what's that over there?
But no, it's just a disclaimer, if you don't have a device that is directly connected to the internet in some way, or at least has some way to connect Wi-Fi or something like that, it might be difficult to be able to listen to the books. But But I think there's some way to download it through Amazon Prime or something like that too.
There's a bunch
of different ways to get to it.
Yeah. Anyway, so I can't really fault them for catering to the type of people that probably makes up 95% of their clientele.
Sure.
I can't fault them for that.
Right.
So non-audiobooks related news. So I'm feeling kind of manly today, Jeff. Not that, and I don't mean that in a sexist way. Everybody can be manly, men, women, children, whatever, anybody.
We're a part of humanity.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead.
I've mentioned in a previous episode that I'm going to be building an arcade cabinet.
Oh, right. Okay.
I finally started laying some of the groundwork for that. I've been doing a lot of research, and I even had my wife get a book for the library that I could then make use of to plan it out. But I bought a bunch of it's called MDF. It's really dense particle board. Mm-hmm. And so I bought some really big, heavy sheets of that. And I bought a power saw, like a jigsaw. Mm-hmm. It's the first heavy duty power tool I've ever used.
Sure.
And I didn't do a great job, but hey, I still have all 9 of my fingers. Right. That's a joke. I have 10 fingers, everybody. However, unrelated, my left ring finger is about almost an inch shorter than my right ring finger, but that's not related to power tools.
Sure.
Anyway, it's another story from their time.
Sure.
So would you like to get into the episode, Jeff?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay. So Jeff, I want you to imagine you are running through town.
Okay.
I want you to make a Constitution check. So go ahead and roll that D20 right there. Okay.
I'm a halfling, so I get to re-roll ones.
Yeah, there you go.
12.
Okay. So you are running through town and you're getting tired out, but you have to get to where you're going. Mm-hmm. You power through, you eventually come out in the clearing and you see there is a giant fire-breathing dragon.
Oh gosh.
That has attacked the city.
Oh no.
However, it is distracted, and because you're that halfling, you're a halfling rogue. You're right behind it and you can see that there's a chink in its armor. So I want you to make an attack roll, and you have advantage on this one because you noticed because it's not aware of you.
Right.
So go ahead and roll your attack.
All right, with advantage.
Are they both 15? Okay.
Wow.
Okay. Well, that's good. So you jump in there, you land on the dragon's wing, You grab your dagger and you stab right between its ribs, and you can feel the giant beast give out a roar and then shudder and then fall to the ground dead.
Aha.
You have slain a dragon. However, you now realize you forgot to ask where its hoard was.
Dang it.
So unfortunately, you will not be making it to the dragon's hoard. I don't know if that picked up.
No. I mean, it usually gets drowned out by the sounds anyway, but it doesn't matter.
All right. So the item today was submitted by Justin from Crit Academy. I forgot to mention earlier. I just want to tell everybody to listen to Crit Academy. It's a great podcast that we have a fellowship with. So go to critacademy.com and listen to any of their episodes. They're a great podcast, similar format to ours. If you like us, you'll like them, and vice versa. So Justin from Crit Academy sent me a magic item through email for this episode. And the magic item is the Mall of Displacement. Now, that is not a shopping mall, nor is it a chopping mall. It is a mall that is a big hammer.
Oh, goodness.
So this item, this Mall of Displacement, is an elegant black ivory maul, and it's made from the bones of a displacer beast. Everybody who has listened to our episode 20?
Yeah, I think
anybody who listened to our episode 20 knows that I like displacer beasts.
Yes.
The head of this mighty maul is topped with the skull of the beast. Additionally, part of the handle is wrapped tightly in its flesh, with one of its tentacles hanging down from the end like a ribbon. The maul can create an illusion that gives the appearance that is in a slightly different location than it truly is, confusing your foe in the midst of combat. Now, when you hit a creature with a weapon attack, you can expend one charge from the maul to distract the creature, giving your allies an opening. The next attack roll against the target by an attacker other than you has advantage if the attack is made before the start of your next turn. And the weapon recovers 1d4 charges at dawn. Doesn't say how many it has maximum, but, probably 3 or something. I don't know. Anyway, it's a pretty simple item.
Yeah.
But I love it.
Yeah, and anything with that good of a description is like, it doesn't matter what it does, even if it's just a tiny little effect. It's a fun item to have in your possession. It's like a nice trophy.
I would love to have an object like a hammer, for example, that when I hold it in my hand, it's not actually right here. It's 2 feet to the right or whatever. That's such a cool idea, and one of the reasons I love the Displacer Beast. I think it's just, in addition to the monster's design, I love that ability. It's just so cool.
Yeah, that's really neat.
In one of our Friend Quest episodes, go to YouTube, type in Friend Quest and Tower of Doom.
Yeah.
If you want to see this example. There was a point we were playing Tower of Doom, and we encountered a Displacer Beast.
Yeah.
And I love that. That's my favorite encounter of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And when you're fighting it, there are 2 of them on the screen. One of them has a shadow, the other doesn't.
Right, yeah. And I think before you get to it, you encounter there's a guard that's almost dead on the ground, and before he dies, he's beware of the 2 creatures with only 1 shadow or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, he makes some clue to it, and then we're like, what is that? And then it's a Displacer Beast.
Yeah, I think that was a really cool way to do that in the game.
Yeah, for sure.
And it led to a really interesting encounter. So the Maul of Displacement is really cool. And the fact that it lets you confer some of that to your weapon is cool too. The mechanics, it's a little strange that you making your weapon appear in a different spot would give an ally advantage. But at the same time, if it was just that you gave yourself advantage, that's a lot more boring. I don't think that would be a good idea.
I'm thinking the way it is because it's you're confusing the creature, and then and then that confusion kind of carries on into the rest of the round.
Maybe.
Or so you're it might not be the weapon doesn't have the full abilities of a Displacer Beast or anything, but it kind of I don't know, it confuses the target into you hit them in the head with it enough, hard enough, and it kind of confuses, and maybe they're not seeing things right. So they'll kind of have the effects of being tricked by a Displacer Beast or something.
Yeah.
But because when you first read it to me earlier, before you had finished it, I was like, oh, it probably just gives you advantage or something like just an advantage attack on it.
And that would make sense, but I think that would be way less interesting than this item deserves.
Yeah,
I think.
And this has the potential to be more powerful because you have all of your allies have that effect basically. So.
Right.
So yeah, it's a really cool one.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. So again, a simple item, but I love the theming.
Yes. And, Gabe really likes Displacer Beasts.
Yes, I do. So Jeff, if anybody wanted to submit items or questions to our podcast, how would they do so?
They can send us an email at, what is it? Shoot, I remember this.
I think it's like Gabe and Jeff at podcast.net. Net? Sure. Is that a thing?
No, they can send us an email at InterPartyConflict@gmail.com.
Yes. Do not send an email to Gabe and Jeff at podcast.net. That is my personal account. Do not send me spam.
Yeah, he doesn't let me use it.
All right. So I think you ready to get into some questions?
Yeah, sure. Let's get going.
All right.
So our first question comes from Jason through our email. And he asks, have you used any rituals or exorcism style encounters and have any tips or know of any good resources for ideas on how to design them?
Yes. Now, there's a couple ways to take this question. He gave like a little story as well when he submitted the question. I'll get to that in a second, but I'll go with the way that he didn't mean this. If you were to be running an encounter where, for example, the enemies are doing some sort of an evil ritual or an exorcism or something like that, let's say that's what he was asking.
Sure.
There's some ways to do that. You could have it be that, the enemies are doing some ritual up on like a dais or something. The players show up and have to get to them. Mm-hmm. In that case, I don't necessarily think it would make for the greatest encounter because it would probably be pretty easy for the players to disrupt that. In that case, you would want to set up the encounter so that the enemies are able to physically block the players from getting where they want to go, either by having enemies that push the player, or having obstacles that the players have to get to, or magical effects that like teleport them away or something like that.
Or a bunch of minions that have like grab attacks or like grappling.
Yeah, grappling, exactly. So, there's ways to do it though. I would say probably the best way is to have stopping the ritual be not an encounter in and of itself, but have there be another encounter before that is on a time limit because of this ritual. So
sure.
You might have it be that the players know that there's about to be a ritual they have to get to, and then they have to like beat up these enemies so that they can get to the ritual in time. Mm-hmm. And in that case, again, you would want the enemies to focus mainly on delaying the PCs rather than just like defeating them.
Yeah, and that might not always be as exciting because you're not there for the ritual and stuff like that. But
exactly.
it is tough. It is tough to have like a ritual thing going on that the players aren't going to find a way to immediately disrupt it and just kind of it's either going to be too easy for them to find a way to disrupt it. Like there's too many things that are required in the ritual that the players can just be like, you had to have drawn a circle. I'm just going to rub out some of that circle.
Exactly.
Something like that. Or there are virgins being sacrificed. You could deflower one of them with a spring attack kind of maneuver.
Jeff, as Jay told us, spring attack doesn't work that way.
Okay.
I'll save everybody's ears from the bleep by just putting it that way.
Sure. So in movies and shows and stuff, when this sort of thing happens, the bad guys usually get away with it because it's a written show, and so they're written to get away with it. So like the main characters are distracted, or like they for some reason let him go about his monologue, or the bad guy like goes on some big monologue or something like that.
Yeah. I've mentioned in a previous episode like the Percy Jackson series, which is a great series of books, and the movies are a terrible series of movies. In the second Percy Jackson movie, small spoilers for a terrible movie that nobody should see. There's this big climactic battle at the end of the movie, which did not happen in the book, where the big bad evil guy of the whole series he's been defeated. Like that's just something that's established in the very beginning of the first book. He was defeated a long time ago, and his minions are trying to bring him back to life. And in the second movie, there's a scene where his remains are in this like big coffin, and they put this magical artifact over the coffin, this like cloth over the coffin that is slowly bringing him back to life. And so there's this big encounter. There's this big fight scene where the main characters just have to get to the coffin and pull the thing off. Mm-hmm. And they do. They get up to the coffin, but rather than pull the thing off, two of them, like, they stand there and they have this heartfelt, like, oh, thank you for saving me. And, oh, you know, you mean so much to me, blah, blah. It's this incredibly stupid scene. Meanwhile, everybody in the movie theater is screaming at the screen. Just grab the stupid cloth. You are literally within arm's reach. Just pull it off and then monologue or whatever. And then, again, spoilers, he comes back to life because they just stood there talking instead of just pulling the stupid thing off.
Right.
In a scene that was not in the book because it makes no sense at that point in the story.
So that sort of thing wouldn't happen in a D&D session because players enter the room. They're going to use their first action to move their full movement speed.
Exactly.
And use their action to pull off the cloth.
Exactly.
And unless, like, you know, unless the bad guy that's up there has, like, attacks of opportunity that can kill them, like, that's not going to stop them.
Yeah. I mean, like, there's ways to make it work by putting a lot of special effects on what's happening, but like it's a lot of work, and anything that the players could stop in one action is going to be hard to discourage.
Yeah.
For very long. You could discourage it for a little while, but
right.
So that type of encounter probably isn't best. That's why I was saying it's probably better to have that be like the consequence for a previous encounter.
Sure.
Now, however, that is not what Jason was asking, because I will get into the example he was giving.
Sure.
His example is kind of the other way around.
Okay.
Now he says, "Hi, Gabe and Jeff. I'm crafting a short adventure involving a demon possessing someone and trying to reach a cult who's trying to release it. My thought was that having the option of some sort of exorcism or ritual to destroy a Horcrux-style relic that ties it to the material plane. I'm sort of winging it and thinking a magical protection ritual is used that over a number of rounds is forced into the item, allowing it to be destroyed by a divine weapon or submerging it in holy water or something along those lines. I like the idea that if they complete everything as planned, the big bad can be severely weakened or destroyed outright." So in this case, he's saying it's the players that are doing the ritual or the exorcism. And then that actually could be really interesting to set an encounter around.
Yeah.
The enemies are trying to get to the players. They're trying to get to the ritual to stop them. And then it's up to the players to keep that from happening. Mm-hmm. So you don't run into the issue of player agency making the player immediately just run up and stop the dang thing.
Right.
Because now it's the enemies that are the ones trying to stop it, and the DM can use as much or as little agency as he or she sees fit.
Sure.
So this kind of similar ways to go about it. You can have the players set up obstacles that the enemies might, it's the enemies are trying to get to a specific location. Mm-hmm. So anything that you can do to stop them from getting to that location will be helpful. You could even try to make it less like combat oriented and maybe make it like a series of, like an exorcism, I would say would be best served as like a series of skill challenges. Like in 4th edition, they have like the skill challenge mechanic where you would make a whole bunch of rolls and you had to like succeed on a certain amount before you failed on a certain amount.
Okay.
So making something like an exorcism more skill based, I think could probably go pretty far. And then maybe have it be that if they fail enough of the checks, then something bad happens. Not necessarily everybody dies, but maybe it's just like, oh, you were trying to weaken the bad guy. Now you didn't weaken him. Instead, you alerted him that you were trying to weaken him.
Right, yeah. He
that.
Knows where you are now or something like that.
Exactly. So you could go about it in like combat, in like a combat encounter. Could do it in a skill encounter. You could even do it in a role-playing encounter. Mm-hmm. There's a movie... what was it? The Last Exorcism, I guess, is one that comes. There's a few movies that came out around that time. There's a movie called The Last Exorcism that came out in like 2012 or something, 2013, something like that.
2013.
Yeah, exactly. Where the main character he's like a priest who's doing like one last exorcism, and it's a found footage movie, so it's got all the advantages.
He was one day away from retirement,
I guess. But like part of the big scene where he's like, near the end of the movie where he's doing like this big exorcism is resolved because he is talking to the supposed demon and he realizes something through their discussion. He realizes like the chink in its armor, so to speak. I'm trying very hard not to spoil it because I think this is a very good movie, but there is a big like climactic scene where he is he is dealing with this girl that is possessed, and then something he learns about her while she's talking to him makes him realize what's going on and how to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's ways to do it through role playing. There's ways to do it, lots of different ways.
Yeah. I mean, this ritual could be summoning some like spirit or something that is able to go and weaken the monster, so you can have them talk to this spirit and find a way to convince it to go and help them out. As
with most good, really good encounters, the more possible solutions you have, the better. So whatever the players, you don't want to make the players have to do a specific thing. So the more ideas they can come up with that you are able to encourage, that's for the better.
So you could have them discover this ritual or whatever, and it could have these very specific guidelines, but maybe they don't have holy water to dip something in. You know? So they might have to find something similar. I don't know. They might have to find something to substitute it or something. They might have to get creative in some way.
Yeah.
Or you might have something around the encounter that around the room or something that could be. I don't know how you would MacGyver holy water, but
Well, when you mentioned that, I was actually thinking maybe you could make a high enough religion check and realize that in some cultures, this other material is considered holy instead.
Oh,
so then you have to go and get that material, but it's easier to come by.
Sure.
Or if you get the blood of a lamb and then you treat it with something or whatever, it doesn't. Maybe it's easier to make than holy water, but it's less reliable or something.
It's it turns out in some culture, vinegar is a type of a holy material or a holy thing, and the barbarian really likes putting vinegar on his French fries, and just happens to have a bottle.
I love that the barbarian has French fries.
Well, he really likes potatoes,
I guess. Small tangent. So the Dicey Tales podcast, one of the people in that, he's a dumb barbarian named Goba. There's a point only a few episodes in where the players are each granted a wish. I don't know if the players realized that they were being granted a wish at the time, but the DM basically gave them all a wish, and then afterwards, I really like what he did. They had a break between that episode and the next one, so he came up with a balanced benefit for each player depending on what they asked for.
Okay.
So one of the players was just I can't remember what it was, but as an example, one player might be oh, I just want to get out of this forsaken place. And then one of the other players is I wish I could fly. Something like that. And so he found a way to give them each a benefit that is balanced with one another. That wasn't an actual example. I just want to get out of here. But he whatever it was, he was able to give them some sort of a mechanical benefit that is on par with what the others got. But one of the players, Goba, this barbarian, he was I wish for pie. And so that he was given a box that every time he opens it, there is a piece of pie inside. He can then eat it, open the box. Oh my goodness, there's another piece of pie. So then he eats it. And then the mechanics wise, the DM made it so 3 times per day or something, he can he can call for a specific type of pie, and each pie gives him a different temporary buff.
Huh.
And and so then for the next several episodes, he's just constantly eating pie. And then there's a bunch of episodes where he's sick from eating too much pie. And then there's episodes where he doesn't want to eat pie anymore because he ate too much of it.
I want pie.
Yep. It's pretty good. And at one point they're going along and there's walking through the woods, and they need a marching chant. So his chant is pie, pie. Eat the pie every time you open the box. I just thought it was great. Anyway, I think this is a good question. I think there's some ways to do that, and whether you're doing it where the players are doing the ritual or the players are stopping the ritual.
Sure.
I think there's different ways to do it, and I think that's neat to look at 2 different possible ways of doing a scenario and how to make them both work.
All right, so this next one, well, actually, we have a couple questions that are somewhat similar, so we're going to tie them together a bit.
Yeah.
The first one is from Muerto X Sky. This was on Paizo. And they asked, how can a DM effectively deal with monsters with multiple abilities and skills?
Yes.
The other question came from Jarl of Rum on Reddit. What are some general tips for running a combat encounter to make the best and most interesting use of monsters' abilities?
think it's funny how both of them had different ethnicity names.
Sure.
Anyway,
and Muerto.
Yes. So, this is a good pair up, I think. When first one, the Muerto X Sky question, we've had this question for a long time. Some questions we've had for a while, and we just haven't found a great answer for it. Like a good answer that isn't just common knowledge, I guess.
Or isn't just like, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Or I have not played that game. So the question of, how do you effectively deal with monsters with multiple abilities and skills? You can do something as simple as just write that monster's abilities out on a cue card or something, and then keep it right in front of you so you don't remember, or so you don't forget what the abilities are, or maybe highlighting them or something. That I will admit there have been many times where I've run an encounter and I've realized afterwards that, oh crap, that monster had so many more abilities than I used, and the encounter would have been so much more interesting and or difficult if I had used all of them. So I mean, we all run into issues like that.
Yeah. So just general familiarity.
Yeah. If you are choosing the monster because you want to use that monster, you're going to be inclined to use its abilities more often than if you're just like, well, crap, I need an encounter. Flip open to this page. All right.
Githyanki, okay.
You're fighting a Githyanki. And so...
Not realizing that they have psionics, which is a whole crazy thing.
Right. So familiarizing yourself with it, taking a little bit extra time and just reading over what you're going to be using, again, 1 or 2 times more than you thought you might have to. Mm-hmm. Just reading over it a couple extra times will probably go a long way. And if you have it written on a separate sheet, I don't necessarily recommend doing this if it's in the book, but highlighting something that you think you might forget is probably a good idea too. Mm-hmm. Maybe you want to highlight your book, maybe you don't. But if you have it written down on something else, highlight, circle, underline, whatever you need to do to draw your eyes to that part of the page.
Sure.
Because even when I'm looking at a monster, I might completely forget, oh, it has this other ability. Mm-hmm. Or if it has 2 abilities, because this is about multiple abilities and skills.
Yeah.
If it has multiple abilities that work well together, then draw a line between those 2 items or two abilities so that when you use one, you know to look at the other.
Sure. And I think a lot of times, well, at least sometimes in some of the monster descriptions, they'll have like the combat. There's a combat paragraph where it tells you how it kind of goes about what it does. And it'll usually, if it has multiple abilities, it'll usually tell you oh, it does this first, and then it'll cast a cloud of fog, and then it'll use its sneak attack ability or something like that.
Yeah. Different editions have gotten, the later editions have gotten better about this. Earlier editions are just kind of here's a big jamboree of abilities.
Yeah.
Figure out what to do with them.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah. I'm reminded of the Dark Souls board game. I think it's really interesting because in that, there isn't a GM. There isn't someone controlling the monsters. The monsters just have specific guidelines of if a player is here, it's going to move towards that player and do this.
Yeah, each monster has its set mechanics that it follows, and it accounts for variables. I mean, there's only so many things that can be done in the game, so there's it's not going to get confused or anything.
Right. So that's not quite the same as in D&D, but even if you do have a bunch of let's say there's a monster you're going to be using a lot, and it has a whole bunch of abilities. You might want to just make some guidelines for yourself so that if this scenario happens, if there are 2 players within 5 feet of each other, it's going to use this area attack. Mm-hmm. If there is a player that is really, really far away, but is dealing significant damage, it's going to use this ranged attack. So maybe, again, it's just familiarizing yourself with what you're using. Maybe if you can make specific instructions for yourself ahead of time.
Yeah.
Then that can help you not have to have so many things to keep track of while you're doing it. Now, another thing, which is why we brought in the second question, a big part of it is if you are going to be using this as the main part of an encounter, the more you can build that encounter around the monster or around whatever, the better. So if you know that the monster has an ability that can push a player, or it has an ability that can restrain a player or something, then you want to try and build the encounter so that it makes good use of that ability. Mm-hmm. So if it has an ability to push, you want to put hazards that it's going to push players into.
Right.
If it has a thing that it can only use when it's hidden, you're going to want to put obstacles in there that it can hide behind.
Yep.
So when you look at a monster's abilities, I want you to look at their abilities and then say, what is the best possible scenario for this ability?
Sure.
If it has an ability that does one specific thing, what is the situation that would make the absolute best use of it?
So an example, a blue dragon has the lightning breath, which is in a line.
Exactly.
Maybe the players come across a young blue dragon in a hallway.
Yeah.
So they more than likely are going to be in a nice straight line that he can fire.
Exactly. So like with that breath weapon, the best possible scenario is a straight line. Mm-hmm. So if part of the encounter, part of the room that the encounter takes place in is like a narrow hallway between a bunch of like fallen over tables, you can probably be sure that some of the players are going to be moving through there in order to get to the dragon. So if you position the dragon in such a way that when there are players lined up in that little narrow hallway, then it can attack them.
Mm-hmm. I think an interesting idea. It's kind of a combination of that and was it Dark Souls 2 with the chariot, or is that Dark Souls 1?
That's Dark Souls 2, yeah.
That's Dark Souls 2 with there's like the chariot, and you had to go in like the little alcoves of the ring to avoid the chariot. So like there'd be a long hallway with a lot of little alcoves, and the players kind of had to like try to stay in the alcoves to like stay out of the line of the fire of the dragon.
Yeah.
And like try to like get closer and closer each round or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so that could make for a really fun, dynamic encounter, because the first part of the encounter is just to get to the dragon.
Right.
And so they have one objective at the beginning, get to the dragon and don't die.
Sure.
And then once they get to the dragon, then it starts the second phase of the encounter.
Sure, yeah.
So that's something that would be an example of taking a monster and making a really interesting use of one of its abilities and building the encounter around it.
Yeah.
Now, this is really good for enemies with multiple abilities because, again, you want to be as familiar with the monster as possible. So the more that monster is integral to the encounter, the more likely you are to use all of its abilities.
Mm-hmm. Actually, the phases thing could be at least a way to like kind of help out. You could divide the abilities up into phases in a way.
Ooh, yes.
So like if you are having trouble kind of like mixing all the abilities in together, like you can't really find good ways to combo them a bit, but you can maybe like when it gets to like half health, it starts using this bigger ability more.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, you might not be familiar with how to use all the abilities, so you can kind of split them up a little bit, which will may at least make the fight a little bit more dynamic, so because it changes up what the enemy is doing, so the players kind of have to adjust to it. But then it's not like overloading you with too many options.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool idea.
I mean, like some monsters, at the very least in 4th edition, there was like the bloodied.
The condition. Yeah, there were a lot of monsters that like once they got to half health, their behavior changed a little bit, and I think that was a really cool part of the game. It's a shame that it isn't part of the core rules, but I mean, you can always implement something like that yourself.
Sure, yeah.
There's a guy on YouTube that has a ton of really, really good videos about like running a game, playing in a game, how to make your game more interesting. His name is, I want to say like Matt Colville or something. I'll definitely put him in the show notes. I might have put him in before, but he has a video all about using some of the mechanics of 4th edition combat in 5th edition to make your encounters more interesting. For example, bloodied, also minions. If you ever want to just throw a whole bunch of really small enemies at the players that they can literally kill in one hit, that can make the encounter more interesting.
Yeah, I did like minions just because it was you got the accomplishment of defeating an enemy instead of like sometimes when you're fighting just a kobold, the dice are just not
sometimes
in your
it
favor.
takes like 3 hits to kill that kobold.
Right, yeah. You're rolling really low on your damage rolls, or you're rolling ones on your attack rolls or something, and so it's way more difficult than the kobold should be.
Yes.
But with the minions, at the very least, like any sort of area damage automatically killed them. Like any attack, any damage at all, they had effectively 1 hit point.
Yeah.
So at the very least, you can like make it feel like you're actually doing something and not just like missing 4 times in a row.
But at the same time, if you willfully ignore them, they can add up.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not something that's pointless.
Right. Yes. Like, yeah, they can still be dangerous, but there's still a sense of challenge and danger there, but it's not, it's not just, I don't know, it's not beating your head against a wall.
Yeah. So when you're making an encounter, you want to make sure you look at every of the monster's abilities and then say, what's the best possible scenario for this? You
need another cola, I think.
I do.
Starting having effect on you.
I am. I need an RC cola now. So you want to say, okay, this attack will be useful if there is this hazard. Mm-hmm. Or maybe it has a buff, so I might as well put another enemy in the encounter that it can buff.
Sure.
Or it's got this weakness, maybe I'll put another enemy in that encounter to buff that weakness. So just look at the monster, look at all of its abilities, think of what the best possible scenario is for each of those abilities, and try to find, you may not use it, but try to find a way to give yourself the opportunity to use that in the encounter. Mm-hmm. And I think that'll go a long way to make your encounters just more interesting all around.
Yeah, a nice dynamic encounter is always enjoyable.
Yes. And if you're listening to the Adventure Zone, if you get into that, there are some great, very dynamic encounters in that.
Nothing's worth it. That's like a stale encounter that you're just kind of rolling low.
Exactly. When the battle just becomes, okay, I rolled a hit, I do 6 damage. I rolled a hit, I missed. I rolled a hit, 12 damage. That's the worst. That is D&D at its worst, in my opinion.
All right, the next question comes from Fingers Fate on Facebook, and they ask, what is the best indicator that I should be running a more episodic adventure rather than a long linked campaign? You've talked before about the risks between doing one or the other, but are there any signs that I should be looking for?
Yeah. So we have talked about the advantages and disadvantages of the two. I would say if you're running like an overarching campaign and you're concerned that your players might not be interested in that, I would say something to look for. Really, probably first off, I'll just say look at how interested your players are.
Sure.
You can probably guess whether your players are having a great time or if they're just like, yeah, okay, we go do that. Mm-hmm. What's that? What did he say? Yeah, sure. We go. I go get the bones, and what would happen next? So that was not the greatest example of that. So on a very basic level, you can look at whether your players are enjoying it, and then maybe if it seems like they're not, try and toss things up a bit. Maybe try to do something more episodic and see if that's easier for them to follow. It might not be that that's the problem. It might just be that they're just not interested. But specifically about if you're trying to decide whether an episodic adventure would be better than an overarching campaign, I would say probably the best indicator is how much your players are taking the hooks that you're putting in there. Because if you are running a long overarching campaign, you're probably going to be trying to sow hooks for later adventures early on. So like you introduce an NPC that has something weird about him that you want later on in the campaign that turns out to be something important. Mm-hmm. If the players, upon hearing, let's say he has like a weird obsession with wax figurines or something, I don't know. If the players are immediately like, whoa, what's he obsessed with? What's that about? Let's try to follow him. Let's see what he does with these wax figurines. If they are biting whenever you give them a hook that's part of the campaign, that probably means that they're interested.
Sure. Yeah.
However, conversely, if you're like, yeah, you meet this guy, he's got this weird obsession with wax figurines, and they're like, can I go? I want to go do this other thing. I have this thing with my character backstory that I want to go do. That probably means that they're less interested in what you're doing with the campaign and more interested in something else. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It could be that they are interested in fleshing out their character in that particular example.
And you might want to encourage that.
Exactly. So if they are focusing on the hooks that you're putting out for the campaign, that is an indicator that they are enjoying the campaign. Mm-hmm. If they're not, if they are less focused or they're just more focused on stuff you didn't plan for, that might be an indicator that you should go with a more episodic campaign, taking cues from them, what they want to be doing.
And that's not to say that you should abandon the campaign.
Absolutely.
In fact, like this could be like you could throw out that same or similar hook again and again later, like or later down the line.
Yeah.
So you could go on a couple of episodic adventures, and then you throw that hook out a little bit again, and if they kind of come back to it and look at it with fresh eyes,
and they're like, oh, I remembered that. I thought that was weird, but I got distracted. What's that about?
Right, yeah. So they might finish an adventure and then they find a wax figurine, and you're like, wait a minute, there's something about this.
Yeah.
And then, like they might be like, there was something about wax figurines. Crap. Like,
yeah.
What was that? So so it could just be, it could be a way to get them, like when something reappears like that in an organic way, it could be it's a lot more drawing. It's a lot more distracting, I guess.
Right. But then again, if you throw out that hook a couple more times and they just are not biting, just let it go.
Just don't try to get them to go into that house. Like they're not going to go in that house.
Now, like I'm not saying that this is something that is always an indication of a bad DM, but in our episode where I talked about my worst DM, that was a big thing, is that like he kept trying to get the players to go take this hook that the players were not interested in, and like just kept coming back. And I feel kind of bad because he obviously put a lot of work into that.
Sure,
but you gotta be able to tell when something is going to work and when it's not.
Right.
So that's something you should watch out for.
Yeah.
So I hope that answers your question. Like you should be looking for how invested your characters are in the overarching plot, and the best way to tell that, I think, is how much they go for the hooks that you give them.
Sure. All right. Our next question comes from Nicholas P. Hi, Nick.
Got to have one from Nicholas P in there.
Yeah. It's not an episode without him. This is for email. Have you ever done a campaign just so you could use an idea you had?
Yeah. Now, we got this a few weeks ago, and I remember thinking to myself, well, not really. And so I wasn't, I had this on the back burner. But then it occurred to me, wait a minute, no, I totally have. Because in about 2 years ago, in 2015, I think, we, I moved back from Tennessee. I lived in Tennessee for about 5 years, and then we moved back here to Michigan. And I had an idea. I really wanted to run this 5th edition campaign. 5th edition had just come out. And so I got you, Jeff. I got our friend Dave. I got some other friends of ours. I got Chris, that we've mentioned many times. Chris and Zave. That's when I met Zave.
Yeah.
So I got a bunch of you guys together, and I was running this campaign. That was the whole point of the campaign. Was I was writing a fantasy novel at the time. And I thought it would be a cool exercise to take what I had written in the book and turn it into a campaign. And that way I could see how well the plot worked for people who have agency. Because I nitpick a lot of stuff, and I do a lot of creative stuff, but I'm always second guessing myself, and I'm always being like, is this going to be good or not?
Yeah, that's a really good idea. That's a really good writing exercise. Like, you put it into a D&D game because like you said, like when a character has agency, they're not going to talk to this person while the bad guy is being resurrected. They're going to do a thing. So
I wouldn't want to write a story that a player could destroy in one action.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's what I was going to do. I was going to run this campaign, this book as a campaign, and then also I could use events that happen in the campaign as inspiration for stuff in the book. With everybody's permission, of course, to use things that they may do in the campaign in my book, just to, be polite to everybody and get their permission first.
Right, of course.
So that's what I was doing for that campaign. And we it did end after not too long, because I started working the job that I'm currently working, and then my hours were really weird at first, and it was really hard to just get the time for it.
Sure, yeah.
But
that's the main issue with trying to play D&D is time.
But it was a lot of fun. It was my first introduction to 5th edition, and it I think a lot of good came from it. I would always be up for restarting that if I ever had the time. But yeah, that's I realized like that's what I was doing. I had this idea, and I was like, I want to make a campaign out of this.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. Sorry, go on.
That's probably like the purest form of that question is like, you're writing a book, and then you wanted to put it into D&D.
I would say not necessarily on like a campaign scale.
Sure.
But a lot of adventures, I would be willing to bet a lot of like specific adventures came to be because whoever wrote it, like they had just a cool idea, and they're like, how can I make this into a an adventure.
I do that with characters all the time. Like I'll come up with a cool idea, and then I'm like, how can I make this into a D&D character? Like, how can I? What stats would they have? So yeah.
There was again the Adventure Zone. There was an entire arc of that. So like one adventure of the Adventure Zone. If I'm remembering it correctly, came about because Griffin, the DM, he had discovered Vocaloids, which are like when you make like a text to speech thing, like you make music out of it. And he wrote like a song in Vocaloid, and then he was like, I could base an encounter. I could base an adventure around this. And so there's an adventure that like periodically the players will get like a little snippet of this song that gives them like a clue to what the overarching plot is. And maybe I imagine that. Maybe I don't remember where I heard that, but that could qualify something like this on an adventure scale rather than a campaign scale.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that'll do it for our questions. But before we finish out the episode, Jeff, I think we should sit back, take a moment to think about our fallen comrades as we toss another log onto the funeral pyre. So our funeral pyre entry for this episode was submitted by Illogical Blocks on Reddit. Now, this is a short one, but Illogical Blocks says, my character died off-screen because he was surrounded by hundreds of gang members in their hideout, but he went out epically. Endo Lee, his name was, a heavily tattooed fat monk with the strength of an elephant. He let the ranger escape, batting away crossbow bolts and crushing skulls as he charged them. An overweight whirlwind of death and fury. So let's raise a glass in memory of Endo Lee, the fat monk. All right. Well, that'll about do it for today. So if anybody wants to submit items and questions, please email us at interpartyconflict@gmail.com. For show notes, a running list of questions asked, and important links, or download the episode, go to interpartyconflict.com. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/interpartyconflict, or our subreddit at reddit.com/r/interpartyconflict. We're also on Twitter at InPartyConflict. We're on we're on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, and YouTube. Please rate, review, and subscribe. We really appreciate it. Also, Jeff, would you like to tell us about FriendQuest?
FriendQuest is our YouTube channel where we play games such as Tower of Doom and Shadow over Mystara. Those are D&D arcade games.
Yep. Hopefully more to come soon. I know we keep saying that, but one of these days when we have time.
Right. Yeah. We don't have as much time to sit down and play games together, but we'll get to it eventually.
Okay. And for everybody who's listening, I just want to remind you all to go to audibletrial.com/conflict for a free audiobook.
Yes.
All right. And our music is made by Boxcat Games from Nameless the Hacker's RPG. So, Jeff, till next time.
Get out there and disrupt some rituals.
Okay. You guys have a good week.
Bye.